downhill consists of a 2.2 kilometre course straight down the mountain. Certainly no place for the faint-hearted, with competitors reaching speeds of up to 80 kilometres per hour.
This is my 10th year coming to Thredbo, and I've enjoyed every single year. I've been having a great time all the way back from '96, and it's taken me that long to win a senior title, so I'm really happy, and I'm going to wear the green and gold bands around my arm at all the World Cups this year proudly, and I'm going to be happy about that.
During the transition from the 90s to the 2000s, there was a really key change in mountain biking. You know, the sport and technology progressed really rapidly.
Around 2002, and I didn't take a bike up to Thredbo. I just went and watched, it must have been a national round, and yeah, straight away just absolutely hooked, just watching these people flying down the hill, having fun, catching the chairlift back up, then the vibe after.
And about that same time, Thredbo also transitioned from, you know, pretty much fire road from top to bottom to single track the whole way down, and the fact that there was that single track from top to bottom with 600 metres of vertical, single track the whole way, that was just this unbelievable raw kind of natural single track through the trees, big boulders, mud, dust, you know, all those conditions in between. It just made it, and probably still is, the best place in Australia to train for World Cup downhill racing.
Yeah, I'd only seen pictures of Thredbo and riders at Thredbo in like Australian mountain bike magazine, so I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Anyway, I get down there and throw myself in the deep end again, and I really wasn't prepared, I think, for the weather. Being a mountain so big, you know, you're way up there with the clouds. One of the biggest mountains with the chairlift. It's still got one of the biggest runs in Australia, right? Like back in the day, I think it was 6 minutes. If you hold on to your handlebars for 6 minutes back in the day on those bikes we were riding, you'd do well in any other race pretty much in Australia, right?
I think when I first started, in some ways I was really lucky only to have one track, and it just so happened to be the hardest one on the hill, that it sort of shaped the rider who I am today. I had to get used to all these gnarly features.
So my first experience at Thredbo, I was only about 11 years old. It would have been about 2001. It was pretty scary at the time because you had to carry your bike up the chairlift. You know, a 20 kilo downhill bike on the Kosciuszko chair, 12-15 minutes to the top for an 11-year-old was pretty daunting, to say the least. It was that sketchy and gnarly that, you know, everyone had to pass this course before we could, you know, go free ride for yourself for the rest of the day. Probably only about a month after I first did that initiation that the inter-schools mountain bike race was coming up. I gave that a crack, and there would have been about 500 kids here racing in inter-schools, and it sort of made me realise how big this sport was, and I pretty much fell in love after that event. Out in inter-schools, we used to be able to race downhill, dual slalom, four cross. So four cross was a 4 at a time gated start, similar to BMX. Pretty gnarly. You'd be launching gaps with 3 other riders. It used to be held down at Friday Flat, and it was such a cool track to look back at it now and see the old footage of how cool those trails used to be.
Thredbo played a huge part in riders getting to the international stage. It was one of the few places that had the elevation, and also just the events they ran being such big events, you know. It always felt like I'm saying, the pinnacle to go to Thredbo, you know, the massive events. Everyone was there. It just felt like an international event.
I just saw it as a place where, you know, you've got this massive mountain, big long chairlift, and it was a really popular place to come and make a name for yourself, right? Like for me, being a Queensland guy, I just see all the big names down there. You know, if you wanted to challenge yourself, progress in the sport and make a name for yourself, you got down to Thredbo where it just kind of generated a lot of talent. You had to go down there, yeah, mix it with the big boys, and like guys like Ronning, Sharples, Craig Fisher, Ben Whitlock, even young Joel Panozzo back in the time, you know. Like, that's pretty much helped me evolve in the sport and progress.
Like you'd see everything in Europe in the World Cups, and you'd see all these people going up on chairlifts, and it was like Europe, and it was fast, and it was long, and it was hard and scary, and so for me it was the pinnacle. So without places like Thredbo, I don't think a lot of people would have succeeded in having enough experience maybe to race and have the confidence to race overseas as well.
I got the opportunity to race World Cups overseas and race for Australia at World Championships, Thredbo was my go-to place for training with the chairlift and the village, the alpine vibe. You go there, you park the car, everything's there. You don't have to leave for the whole weekend or the whole week. You can just ride and train and dial in your lines and your bike, and I think it really helped me get to where I wanted to be in preparation for those big races.
You know, I've spent a lot of time on the sidelines once I stopped racing as a photographer and watching the races and riders across lots of different places in Australia. But each and every year I'd go back to Thredbo and I'd just see people getting faster and faster and faster, and the numbers of people increasing, and it's just a general, that's what's happening in the sport. Like particularly this year, it's just grown phenomenally. I mean, I was down at a bike shop on the weekend and they were commenting how they couldn't even get any bikes in stock. Like, it's just growing massively, and places like Thredbo just contribute to that. It just gives a place for people to go ride, people to progress, and also for somewhere to just hang out. So it's not just a little place to ride, now it's actually a place to hang out.
You had a great track to ride, great track to race, but it was also a great village. You know, you'd get to catch up with everyone, meet up with the local guys there. It's a super cool place. Go fish in the river, go for a swim. It was just all around an awesome experience back then.
I mean, the sport's just getting amazingly better, and I just don't know where it's going to go. I mean, I'm going to be some 70-year-old person that hopefully can do skids and wheelies and maybe do a jump every now and then, but you know, the kids these days and the bikes they've got, I just don't know what's going to happen.